Hello and welcome to this video lecture on the period of ancient Greek history known as the Pentekontaetia. And this term roughly translates as the 50 years. And it covers a span of time from the moment where the Persians are bounced out of Greece. You remember from the last series of video lectures, we looked at how Salamis, Plataea, and Mycale had guaranteed that the Persians would not threaten Greek territory for the foreseeable future. And so that's around the late 470s. We'll look at the span of time from the 470s into the 430s. And it is this roughly 50-year period, not quite 50 years, but close enough, that we will see Athens gain power and prestige that few in the 470s thought was possible. But we'll look at how the Athenians will create an Aegean-wide empire and how they will use that empire to foster a broader based democracy in Athens itself. And we'll take a look at the pivotal role of this guy here. The statue is of the great statesman Pericles, who some of you have probably heard of from other history classes. It is Pericles who will guide Athens to this role of prominence and power. And he will tower over any other political figure of his age. Indeed, the Pentekontaetia is often referred to as the Age of Pericles because of his crucial role in creating the Athens that you and I know. The Athens of the Parthenon and of the great cultural milieu that marked that city and laid down the foundation for all of subsequent Western civilization. So Pericles is the star of this show. But he is not perfect. Indeed, there is some controversy about his policies. We'll take a look at that. His role in basically creating an Athenian empire in the Aegean by basically preying on other Greeks. And we'll take a look at how he managed to create this political career for himself by relying on the consistent support of the Thetes. You may remember from several video lectures ago, Solon's reforms had created 4 wealth-based categories in Athenian society, and the Thetes were the poorest of the poor. Well, it will be Pericles who will recognize the political potential of this particular voting bloc and will use their support to gain an unassailable political preeminence in Athenian political life. So we've got a lot going on in this 50 years. Again, the rise of Athens to imperial leadership of Greeks. We have the rise of Pericles. We have the cultural explosion that all of us recognize when we think of Athens, the Parthenon, Greek tragedy, the art and statuary, philosophy. All of that will take place during this 50-year Pentekontaetia period. So without any further interruption, let us begin our exploration of this. So, as I mentioned, the Pentekontaetia begins with the Greek victory over the Persians in the second round of the Greco-Persian Wars. The great king Xerxes is sent packing, and what is important about this latter phase of the Greco-Persian Wars is the fact that the Greeks actually go on the offensive. Once the Persian ground force is defeated, largely destroyed at Plataea, a Greek naval force will sail to Ionia and destroy and capture a large number of Persian ships at the Battle of Mycale. And Mycale will mark the start of a series of offensives in which it will become the Greek intent to liberate all the cities of Ionia, all the Greek cities that had once paid tribute to the Persians, the plan is to liberate them and give them back their freedom. Now, initially, there is some debate as to just how far the Greeks should go. And is a debate, too, over who should take on the mantle of leadership given this effort to liberate the cities of Ionia. And initially, it is, of course, the Spartans. They are always looked at as the military leaders of the Greek world. And in 478, we see the Spartans, along with the Greeks, although along with the Athenians, although it is primarily an Athenian naval force. You'll always see a Spartan generally in charge of any military force, even if it is a naval one. And of course, the Spartans were primarily a ground power. Well, you may remember the regent Pausanias, who was in command of the Greek forces at Plataea when they achieved that victory. Well, Pausanias will travel to Ionia and will initially be in charge of the Greek efforts there. However, a trend will emerge when we see these Spartan leaders. Once they are away from the close scrutiny of Sparta, they get a little crazy. They tend to really enjoy the finer things in life. And we see that Pausanias, who sets himself up in a couple of places, but Byzantium is his primary base up here. He really does enjoy the luxuries that he finds that the Persians have left behind. And he also becomes rather obstinate, and he's always he is of the Spartan mold, so in his mind it is the Spartan way or the highway, and so he's unwilling to compromise. And generally, there are a lot of stories associated with his gradual descent into corruption. And anyway, long story short, Pausanias is not viewed as a leadership figure, and indeed he's recalled to Sparta, and the Spartans in general are leery about a overseas commitment in Ionia, because they see what is happening to their leaders once they are away from the Peloponnese and away from the rigorous Spartan lifestyle. They tend to grow corrupt. So there is kind of a pause in the Spartan willingness to assert themselves on a broader base into this new Ionian theater of operations. And so the Ionians themselves, once the Persians are gone, once they are defeated at Mycale, the Ionians really do fear that someday the Persians will come back. So they want an alliance in place, and they want one of the mainland Greek states to lead it. And if the Spartans are not going to lead it, then by default that position will go to the Athenians. And it just so happens that the Athenian representative in Ionia at the time was a very prominent and respected Athenian named Aristides. You may remember Aristides was a political opponent of Themistocles, and Themistocles had Aristides ostracized or exiled. Well, during the emergency of 480, all the Athenian exiles were recalled for service, and Aristides came back. And this guy was so well respected, and he spoke and acted so well that the Ionian city-states really thought that it should be Athens that should lead this alliance. And the Athenians agree. Now, I should mention as a footnote, what happens to Themistocles after orchestrating the great victory at Salamis? Themistocles himself will be exiled in the mid-470s, and he will actually wind up in the service of King Xerxes as a type of baron in charge of a little slice of Persian territory, and he will live out the rest of his days basically an exile from Athens, the city-state that he had saved. So again, kind of a sad end to Themistocles. But now Athens is on the road to preeminence in the Aegean. This alliance that Athens will lead, which will ultimately be known as historically the Delian League. The Greeks themselves never refer to it as the Delian League, but I will for convenience sake. This Delian League is going to be formed, as you can see, in 477 BCE. And a lot of the coastal areas and a lot of the islands in the Aegean will become members, at first voluntarily, because again, there is this fear that the Persians will come back. But as we'll see over time, the Athenians will recognize that this is a way to establish themselves politically and economically as the dominant power in all of Greece. So, Delian League. It's called the Delian League because an oath sworn on the island of Delos, which was sacred to Apollo, and this island was centrally located right here, Delos, and this was traditionally a place where all Ionians came to worship. Of course, the Ionians in Asia Minor, but also we must remember that the Athenians themselves were Ionian, and they all spoke that similar Greek dialect, the Ionian dialect. So Delos, it is agreed upon, will be the site of the treasury, because of course any military alliance needs money and resources to sustain itself. And it is decided that initially the treasury site will be on the island of Delos, hence historically the name of the alliance itself as the Delian League. Now, the members of the league, they actually swear this oath that when they arrive on the island of Delos in their initial meeting, they swear an oath. They take this huge chunk of iron and they throw it into the sea, and they say that we will all stay together until this iron floats to the surface. And basically it means that this is going to be a perpetual alliance. And again, it is the purpose of the league to make sure that the Persians never ever come back into the Aegean. To try to reassert their presence there. Now, the Athenians, led by Aristides the Just, he was called, they apportion the dues that each member polis has to pay. Now, initially, it is encouraged that the member states commit men and triremes to this, what will be a naval alliance. And that is the initial status. For the poles who don't have any naval assets to contribute, they can pay in money. But also there will also be a monetary component that everybody must pay, and that is, of course, to pay all the rowers that will be necessary to maintain this this fleet, which, as you can see here, will be quite massive. The original contributions that we have a record of, these contributions were called the phoros, about 450 talents of silver. Now, a talent was a unit of measuring wealth. We don't have to break it down now, but what that does mean is that this gave the Delian League at its inception enough resources to muster a fleet of more than 400 warships. So this is quite a substantial military force, and it will be more than enough to keep the Persians at bay. Now, we're going to get into some internal politics in Athens. What we see is that with the ostracism of Themistocles, the next prominent Athenian figure to step to the fore is going to be a guy named Cimon. Cimon was the son of Miltiades. You may remember Miltiades, the victor of Marathon. Miltiades had actually run afoul of the Athenian assembly. He had actually been fined quite heavily for a failed military expedition that had taken place after Marathon, and his family was in heavy debt. Now, Cimon, as the oldest son of Miltiades, is able over time to rebuild the family fortunes both financially and politically. And by the 470s, he emerges as the leader of a conservative aristocratic faction. And it is this faction that will be responsible ultimately for ostracizing Themistocles. Now, the Cimonian faction, that led by Cimon, believed that it is the Persians who are the deadliest foe of the Greeks, certainly of the Athenians, and therefore Cimon and his group want to keep the foreign policy focus on fighting Persians. Now, one of the reasons that Cimon and Themistocles had such a political feud was that Themistocles felt that it would be the Spartans that would ultimately present to Athens its greatest challenge for political, military, and economic supremacy in the Greek world. So there is this kind of debate going on amongst the policy makers of Athenian society over who constitutes the greater threat to Athens. Is it the Persians or is it the Spartans? And we're going to see this debate play out over the course of certainly of this lecture. Now, Cimon, because he is so focused on fighting Persians, he is leading attack after attack on these isolated outposts of Persian power, and one by one he's knocking them down. And finally, Cimon will, in 466, lead a naval expedition well beyond the boundary of what constituted Ionia, and wind up crushing a Persian fleet right about here at the Eurymedon River, which flowed out into the sea. And he catches the Persians napping and captures or destroys a great part of their overall fleet. And it is after this defeat at the Eurymedon River that it really becomes evident that the Persians, it'll be a while, if at all, before they ever come knocking on Ionia's door. So again, Cimon achieving great success, because of course military success translates as political success, and Cimon was a very astute politician. There are all sorts of great stories about him, and for a while he is the first man in Athens, and his position seems unassailable. Now, it is, however, during this period where if you have the Persians defeated at the Eurymedon River, and everybody recognized that this was a decisive defeat for the Persians, many Delian League members begin to question the necessity of the League. And you get a sense that many of these Delian representatives were like, yeah, I know we swore this oath that we would be together forever, but look, in practical terms, it looks like the Persians really have been defeated and they probably won't come back. So, maybe we should think about ultimately at some point in time disbanding the League. It is a drain on resources, and, it's not necessary. Well, the Athenians will have none of that, because by this point in time, remember, the League itself is established in 477. By the time we get into the mid-460s, the League has been around, and as we'll see, it has been a huge boon to the Athenian economy. Now, initially, what the Athenians decide to do very cleverly is tell the League members that they no longer have to send men or ships. Instead, they can pay their entire tab, if you will, their dues, with silver. And this temporarily allays the concerns that the Delian League members have had, because what is happening is this constant campaigning is taking their men away from other responsibilities that they have at home, and this was becoming a bit of an annoyance to the Delian League members. So this accommodation that the Athenians make of allowing them to pay just cash instead of ships and men temporarily diffuses the issue. but it won't entirely go away. Now, what I would point out to you is the Athenians are very clever in that the Athenians say, give us the cash, we'll build the ships, we'll hire the rowers, and we'll take care of the military side of things. All you guys are going to do is bankroll us. Now, of course, this in a way makes the Delian League members more vulnerable if they are without military forces, and of course it makes the Athenians much more powerful by comparison with the Delian League members. Now, there are some rumblings amongst some of the Delian League members that they want out anyway. And in 471 or 470, the island of Naxos that you and I have looked at before, Naxos down here, tries to get out of the Delian League, but it is basically a fleet is sent. The Athenians send a fleet and basically tell the Naxians, you better think again. And so Naxos is forced to stay in the Delian League. Something more serious occurs in the year 464 when the island polis of Thasos wanted to leave the Delian League. And Cimon will lead a force, an Athenian force, up north to besiege Thasos. And unfortunately for Cimon, the siege goes on and on and on. It's about a 2-year siege. And the Athenians are getting discouraged, and some of the luster is being is falling away from Cimon's military reputation. And of course, if he is up north leading the siege, then he's not handling political affairs in Athens, and this offers an opportunity to his political opponents to begin to organize resistance against him, and an attempt is made to end his political career. But for the time being, Cimon is able to maintain his preeminence. The polis of Thasos does surrender, and ultimately the siege ends. Cimon is able to come back and again bolster his own political support. But in a way, a shot has been fired across his bow, and he knows it. Now, it is in the 460s that we do start to see tensions emerge, not just amongst the Athenians themselves, but also between the Athenians and the Spartans. Now, the Spartans were growing concerned at the rise of Athenian power. Probably some of the Spartans were kicking themselves as to foregoing the leadership position in the Delian League and basically allowing the Athenians to fill that void. But we see that in the 460s, Cimon, who as long as he is the first man in Athens, as long as he is the preeminent political figure, the Spartans are reassured because he is an aristocrat. He believes firmly in an Athenian Spartan cooperation. He even pushes pretty consistently for a formal alliance between the two. Cimon even names his son, his eldest son, Lacedaemonius, or the Spartan. And so there's a close relationship between Cimon and the Spartans. He even paints the relationship as two yokemen, in a sense of Sparta and Athens being yoked together to pull the rest of the Greeks into the future. And as long as he's in charge, the Spartans are reassured. But now, with this attempt to basically end his political career by a group that are historically known as the Radical Democrats, okay, and this is a modern term, they didn't call themselves this, but there was a guy named Ephialtes who seems to have been, in a way, a follower of Themistocles. And Themistocles, of course, is responsible for building the Athenian navy. Themistocles always had close relationships with the Thetes. It will be Ephialtes that will inherit the leadership of this particular political faction that acted on behalf of the Thete class. And of course, Ephialtes will have a younger protege, Pericles, who will, oddly enough, be of aristocratic ancestry himself, yet will decide to make common cause with the Thete faction, the radical democratic faction, and will ultimately rise to great prominence as a leader of that faction. Now, evidently, what these radical Democrats wanted was to extend the rights and privileges of democracy to all socioeconomic classes, especially the Thetes. And they make a concerted effort to strip away the basically the dominant ruling council was the Areopagus, and they wanted to strip away this council, which was largely aristocratic in its composition. They wanted to strip this council of its powers and put a lot of those powers into the assembly and to the law courts, and then make it possible for the Thetes to serve in these newly created offices and as jurors. So the radical Democrats have quite an agenda that was considered radical, certainly to Cimon and his faction. But for the time being, Cimon is in a powerful position, and Ephialtes, who is joined by his young protege Pericles, who we'll talk more about a little later on, can scheme all they want until an opportunity does present itself, and that opportunity will occur shortly after the revolt in Thasos. We see Cimon is deployed up north, and we see Ephialtes and Pericles try to stir up some trouble against him, but Cimon is able to hold on to his political position. But then we see another type of crisis that can be exploited by the radical Democrats, and that is an earthquake at Sparta. Kills quite a few Spartan homoioi. Remember, the Spartan homoioi, when they weren't deployed on campaign, they tended to live together in barracks. And evidently this earthquake caused a number of buildings to collapse, killing large numbers of Spartan warriors. And the Helots, who are waiting for any opportunity to revolt, seize this opportunity, and a pretty broad-based and serious Helot uprising threatens the overall stability and survival of the Spartan state. So the situation is so serious that the Spartans ultimately do ask Athens for aid, and under the terms of the agreement that had been signed or agreed upon back during the formation of the Hellenic League in 480, the Athenians were required to respond. Cimon brings this issue to the Athenian assembly, and basically argues that Athens is obligated to help Sparta in its time of need. And there's a bitter debate because Ephialtes and Pericles and the radical Democrats want nothing to do with helping Sparta. They look upon the Spartans as a regressive society, which is too much fond of oligarchic government. And of course, you guys may remember the Spartans had almost quashed the infant Athenian democracy before it was even fully born. So a lot of the radical Democrats really did not want to help the Spartans. But it is a credit to Cimon that he is able ultimately to get the Athenians to agree to send a force of about 4,000 hoplites, led by Cimon himself, into the Peloponnese to help stabilize the military situation for the Spartans. Now, we need to note that 4,000 hoplites leaving Athens presents an opportunity to the radical Democrats to force through some measures that could ultimately hurt Cimon. So there is an opportunity here. And that opportunity is actually made even better because when Cimon and his Athenian force gets to the Peloponnese, gets into Spartan territory, it's not very long before the Spartans send the Athenians packing, in part because the Spartans were worried that the Athenians would actually wind up siding with the Helots and supporting them. And this gives us a sense of just how much distrust there was between Sparta and Athens by the mid 460s. So the Athenians are sent packing, and this is a huge slap in the face to Cimon and his policy of having a close relationship with Sparta. I mean, you can't really justify such a policy position if the Spartans are treating you in this manner, basically throwing you out of their territory. So this opens up another opportunity for the radical Democrats to point at Cimon and his failed Spartan policy and say, you see, Cimon's his judgment is no good. He is actually not, he doesn't have Athens' best interests at heart. He's too close to the Spartans. So ultimately, Cimon is ostracized in 462. And it is also with Cimon out of the way that the radical Democrats are able to strip away the powers of the Areopagus, that aristocratic council that had held a great deal of power in the Athenian government. And those powers were now distributed to the assembly and to other political outlets. So this sets off quite a response from the conservatives, and Ephialtes himself is assassinated in 462. And this, of course, will pave the way for the rise of Pericles, who was Ephialtes' young protege. And indeed, with these events now taking place, we see that Sparta and Athens are actually going to get into a confrontation that is historically known as the First Peloponnesian War. And that's not necessarily to be confused with the Great Peloponnesian War that we will explore in subsequent video lectures. But this gives us a sense just how frosty the relationship was between Athens and Sparta by 461. But it does seem that the break that leads to this outbreak of the First Peloponnesian War has to do with the Spartan perception that the radical Democrats are in the ascendant position. It seems like they're calling all the shots politically in Athens. They're able to ostracize Cimon. They are able to strip away the aristocratic oligarchic organ of government, that Areopagus, and now the Athenian democracy has taken a really radical turn. And this, coupled with the power that Athens is able to display in the Aegean with the Delian League, and its somewhat heavy-handed treatment of some of the Greek states that have tried to leave the Delian League, this leads the Spartans to decide that maybe now is a good time to test the strength of Athens in a direct military confrontation. Now, of course, Pericles did nothing to allay Spartan fears. Again, Pericles is of the mind that it is Sparta, not Persia, that ultimately is the greater threat to Athenian supremacy. So he immediately after Cimon's exile, Pericles maneuvers the Athenian assembly to creating alliances with Thessaly and with, more importantly, with Argos down here. And when it is seen by the Spartans that these radical Democrats, these radical Athenian Democrats, are meddling in the Peloponnese, that really does set off alarm bells. And what will further seal the deal and set the two sides on the course for conflict is when the crucial city-state of Megara, located right here. Megara is situated on a land bridge that connects the Attic Peninsula with the Peloponnese. And traditionally, this was a Spartan sphere of influence, because the Spartans, in order to project their power, because they had no real navy to speak of, they needed to maneuver their ground forces into the mainland, or at least have the ability to threaten to maneuver their ground forces into the Attic Peninsula, and that would keep Athens in line. Well, a democratic faction within Megara seizes control of the entire polis and immediately signs an alliance with the Athenians and agrees that it will basically close off access to the Attic Peninsula should the Spartans ever decide to march that way. And this, from the Spartan perspective, is intolerable. So you get a Spartan declaration of war. And as you can see, this war will run hot and cold for about 15 years. The contours of the conflict are that the Spartans will rely on ground power, and the Athenians will rely on naval power. And the Athenians are able to basically, very short order, sweep whatever naval assets that the Spartans do have, sweep them away, and the Athenians will capture an island off the coast of the Attic Peninsula called Aegina, and this had been a Spartan ally, and we'll see that the Athenians will also move to the north into this area of Boeotia, and attempt to basically expand its power northward, and that will result in the Battle of Tanagra, which results basically the two sides fight each other to a draw. And things kind of plod along for a few years until the Athenians decide to become involved in a foreign venture that is going to cause them to have to split their forces between keeping their opponents in Greece at bay and then taking on a new adversary. And the new adversary will be Egypt. In 460, shortly after the outbreak of the First Peloponnesian War, a Delian League fleet is going to land in Egypt, which had been a Persian satrapy, a Persian province, but the Egyptians had revolted, and the Delian League forces decided that now is a good opportunity maybe to peel away Egypt from the Persian Empire. And this is a pretty long-term commitment, and things initially are going well, but in 454, the Persians are able to launch a counteroffensive, retake Egypt, and they manage to capture and destroy a sizable Delian League force. This may have well been in excess of 100 triremes that the Delian League will lose. Now, the Athenians, recognizing that this type of setback could cause the Delian League members to revolt against Athenian political leadership, decide that they need control of the assets, of the financial assets of the Delian League. So, under the tutelage of Pericles, an excuse is made up that Delos is it's too close to Egypt now, and now that the Persians could come back and want revenge, the island of Delos is too dangerous a place to keep all the cash. So the Delian League treasury will be moved to Athens. And of course, the Delian League members are not crazy about this, but they are not yet in a position to stand against Athenian authority. Now, in 449, we see that the Athenians are really feeling the pinch. They are waging kind of a low-intensity war in Greece that occasionally turns high intensity. And they're also committing resources to making sure that the Persian resurgence only extends to Egypt and doesn't result in the Persians getting any grand ideas about moving into the Aegean. So Pericles negotiates what becomes known as the Peace of Callias. Callias was the Athenian diplomat who negotiated the treaty with the Persians, and this ends hostilities in 449. And then in 446, the Spartans and the Athenians are able to negotiate a peace treaty when Pericles and the Spartan king, one of the two Spartan kings, King Pleistanax, come to an agreement. And this will result in what should have been a 30 years peace, but as we'll see, it won't last half that long before the Great Peloponnesian War will begin in 431. But for the time being now, all these conflicts are settled, and the Athenians can look to basically enhance their own domestic agenda, and that domestic agenda is going to be shaped, of course, by Pericles. And I should mention that the source of Pericles' political power was his ability to get elected time and time and time again. Over the course of 30 years, he was always seemed to be elected to the board of 10 generals. The traditional political office of archon had been the highest office in the land, the highest elective office in the land, but the radical Democrats are able to strip away that office as an elective office, so you're basically chosen by lot to be an archon, and that office loses its luster and its political power. But the being elected general time and time and time again is one way to basically secure your position. And it is this board of generals of strategoi that will form what is, for all intents and purposes, an executive branch of the Athenian government. Because even though generals were there on hand to serve during times of conflict, they also held enormous influence whenever they spoke in front of the assembly. So it was that position that allowed Pericles to dominate Athenian political life for decades. Now, how did he do it? How did he get elected time and time and time again to this board of generals? Well, he basically could always rely on the electoral support of the Thetes. And we have seen that the Thetes are now in that position that we have discussed earlier, where if you show up on the battlefield, you will gain greater political influence. And we saw how the hoplite class is able to do this. And now with the battles at Salamis, at Mycale, at the Eurymedon River, and the maintenance of a Delian League Aegean naval force, the Thetes, who are the rowers of these triremes, really do begin to assert themselves politically, and they are shepherded in many ways by Pericles, who convinces them that he has their best interests at heart and that they should support him. And of course, for the Thetes, their interests are closely aligned with the maintenance and even the expansion of the Delian League, because it is the league dues that are paying the salary of these Thete rowers. So the Thetes will favor a policy of continued, basically imperialism, because at this point it is evident to everybody that the Delian League maybe not really that necessary as an anti-Persian alliance, but it certainly is necessary to sustain the Athenian economy and to continue the expansion of the Athenian democracy. So, how exactly did these policies, foreign policy and domestic policy, overlap? Well, for Pericles and for the Thetes, the Delian League alliance, the maintenance of that alliance was an absolute necessity. Because, of course, the league dues paid the salaries of substantial numbers of rowers in the Athenian navy. Again, the amount of Thetes, the number of Thetes who were working as rowers, was incredibly high. And for those members of the Thete class who perhaps were not as fit, were getting a little older and could not find work as rowers, well, they could serve now in offices and on juries, and they could draw a salary. This was something new that Ephialtes and Pericles and the other radical Democrats had proposed. Prior to this, if you served in an office or on a jury, you would not be paid. This was considered part of your civic responsibilities. But the problem, of course, is serving in an office which could last for months, or on a jury which could last for days or weeks. That took you away from your place of employment. Now, if you're an aristocrat, that's no problem. You've got the wealth that you can absorb the losses. But for everybody else, it was a financial hardship to be a full participatory member of the Athenian democracy. So the salaries instituted by the radical Democrats helped to defray the costs of holding offices and serving on juries. Now, also, and we'll get into this a little more in the next slide, what we'll see during the Pentekontaetia is the rebuilding of Athens. Remember, when the Persians had occupied Athens, they had burned much of the city to the ground. They had totally destroyed it. So the Athenians have to reconstruct their city. And as the wealth begins to pour into Athens, and there is a feeling of Athenian pride, the idea is to rebuild the city on a very, very grand scale indeed. And that, of course, will require resources and a workforce. And now we can see that these public works projects are also going to employ many poor Athenians as artisans and craftsmen and laborers primarily. So that money to finance these building projects ultimately will come out of the Delian League dues. So we can see that Delian League money, which was supposed to be exclusively for the maintenance of military assets focused on keeping the Persians out of the Aegean, that money has now found its way into all sorts of Athenian domestic expenditures. And again, this is a type of perversion of the original intent. And finally, to defray the high costs of grain, subsidized grain had to be brought in from some of the soil-rich areas of the broader Mediterranean and Black Sea. And this will become the key foreign policy requirement of the Delian League, is making sure that grain from the Greek colonies that are ringing the Black Sea can make these grain shipments can make their way through the Bosporus, down the Hellespont, and into Athens itself. So keeping these choke points open and the seas under Athenian control becomes a priority. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the Delian League gets involved in supporting a an uprising, a revolt in Egypt against Persian rule. And one of the likely reasons that the Athenians, and certainly Pericles, who was a big fan of this, wanted to do this is to gain access to the rich grain of Egypt. This was would be a big boon to providing secure and subsidized food shipments to the mass of poor Athenians who would have a hard time making ends meet. This is also the case in Sicily, which was colonized by Greeks. The Athenians also seek out relationships with the Sicilian Greeks regarding the possibility of buying and shipping grain into Athens. So we see that Pericles has kind of crafted this this patronage machine that is going to guarantee his political fortunes, but along the way will also, of course, benefit the poorer Athenians, particularly the Thete class, both politically and financially. There is a question, though, as to whether or not this is well, is it unsavory that this expansion of Athenian democracy and the expansion of the Athenian economy is based on the exploitation of their fellow Greeks? So in 449, well aware of the criticism that the Athenians are facing, because of course in 449 the Peace of Callias had been signed, and according to the terms of this peace treaty, the Greeks would not sail out of the Aegean and bother any of the Persian provinces that were along the coastline, particularly Phoenicia and others along the Levant. And in return, the Persians agreed that they would never, ever think about messing with the Ionian Greek areas. So it seems that the Persian threat has been neutralized. And Pericles knows that the logical question is, well, then why the heck do we need a Delian League alliance? So he decides to get kind of cute here. He summons a grand Hellenic League conference, just as the Greeks did back in 481 on the eve of Xerxes' invasion of Greece, when the Hellenic League was first formed. Well, technically the Hellenic League is still in place, and Pericles wants to summon the League to address the future of the Delian League, and he also wants to throw in some other wider Greek affairs. But none of the other city-states chooses to respond to this invitation, especially the Spartans, who say to themselves, we're not going to let this Athenian summon us. Who does he think he is? So in a way, this is probably something Pericles anticipated, because as you can see here, with no other independent Greek polis there to raise objections, Pericles announces that the Delian League must continue, and that the League treasury, which is now in Athens, had been in Athens since 454, that League treasury would be used to reconstruct the monuments that had been destroyed by the Persians. And of course, the monuments, the monuments that will be reconstructed first are going to be those that existed in the city of Athens. And here we start to see the construction of that great architectural wonder, the Parthenon, which sits atop the Athenian Acropolis. So with this now, this public announcement that we Athenians are basically going to use Delian League money whichever way we want, we know there is no more Persian threat, but the Delian League is going to continue to exist. You Delian League members are going to continue to pay your dues, and we Athenians are going to use that money however we see fit. And so, in a way, the veneer is torn away from the Delian League as an anti-Persian alliance, and everybody, including the Athenians, fully recognize this is an Athenian empire. And I leave you with this. The Parthenon, of course, it'll take about 12 years to construct, beginning shortly after Pericles' announcement. But also another long-range construction project that is going to be very important to our future discussions is Pericles' insistence that the long walls, what were called the long walls, be completed. And in this diagram here you see what's left of the Parthenon. In this diagram, here you see the city of Athens. And Athens at this point in its history was primarily served by the port of Piraeus. And other earlier Athenian leaders, most notably Themistocles, had advocated the refortification of Athens by building walls around the city. What Pericles, though, wants to do is build walls. Basically, you're looking at about, I think it's about 8 miles. 8 miles from Athens to Piraeus, maybe just over 8 miles. He wants to create a causeway that is going to be protected by a north wall and a south wall, and he's going to wall off the entire Piraeus. So what you have here is a conduit, basically a very secure conduit, by which those grain ships can arrive in port, and that grain can be hauled up to the city of Athens and distributed to the population. And we see we recognize here kind of the budding of an idea that Pericles may have to make Athens siege-proof. Again, Pericles recognizes that the Persians are out of the picture and that it is the Spartans who will basically be the big threat to Athenian supremacy. And the Spartans are a ground power, and if you can somehow make Athens siege-proof, then you will guarantee that the Athenians can withstand any assault by the Spartans or any other hostile ground power. So the creation of these long walls becomes a key point of the public works projects that will be financed by Delian League money. And again, this issue is going to play a key role in future events, as we'll see in upcoming lectures.